Greetings, programs! Welcome back to The Book Thing, a series where I talk about, well, if I have to tell you, you really haven't been paying attention. So, the first one of these I looked at a sci-fi classic, and I also mentioned that I was reading two books at the moment, and one of them I've just finished. Now, one was David Copperfield, which is probably going to take me a while, but the other is The High Mountains of Portugal, and that's the one I've just finished. Now, that's a book by Yann Martel, which is actually quite a recent one, and I've only ever read one other novel by him, The Life of Pi, and that was a good few years ago, so my memories of it are rather hazy. Of course, there's also been a much more recent film adaptation, but I haven't seen that, and honestly, I don't have much of a desire to. If I was going to go back to that story, I'd probably go and reread the novel, and my memories of it are that it was very enjoyable, that it was very good, and it's one of those books where it was partly the story but partly the act of reading it, and that is kind of relevant to what I'm going to say about the High Mountains of Portugal, because a large part of my enjoyment of that came just from reading it, reading Mr. Martel's prose. And I mean, I could talk a bit about the plot, and it's a very allegorical book, and honestly I don't think it's as good a book, but it was nice to sit down and read. And if I had to absolutely come up with an analogy for it, it would be that it was like standing in a stream and, watching the water flow by. It was that kind of an experience, and that was probably true for The Life of Pi as well, because a large part of that book is set in a boat floating in the middle of an ocean. And you'd think, how do you write hundreds of pages about a boat in the middle of an ocean when there's not a lot going on? But somehow Yann Martel did it, and did it very well, and made it very readable and enjoyable. And he's done the same thing again, except it's definitely less good of a story. I mean, The Life of Pi was very allegorical itself. I won't say too much about it in case you've never read it, because there is a kind of a way in which I could spoil it, but I won't. But there's no such kind of, not twist exactly, but there's no such turn in the tale with High Mountains. It's an interesting book. It's split into three sections, and you could almost argue that it's three short linked stories rather than a novel in three sections. And I'm not sure which way I would go with that. I mean, there are plenty of other novels that have used that kind of structure. I mean, to use a classic sci-fi example, of course, Isaac Asimov's Foundation is a series of linked short stories. In fact, that, when it first appeared in parts, was as short stories, and then they were kind of bundled together and published as a novel. And they work very well, and they've got this overarching theme, and that's the same with High Mountains. Another example I could use is Cloud Atlas, although that has a rather unusual narrative structure, and honestly a much more interesting narrative structure. And I think honestly that's just, if I had to save one book from a burning house, and my two options were The High Mountains of Portugal and Cloud Atlas, that was a weird, I don't know why I'm going with this particular, but anyway, yes, it would definitely be Cloud Atlas. Why I'd be saving books from a burning house, I don't know. And why those would be the only two books in the house, I also don't know. But anyway. So basically, I mean, it's a book about mortality, death, loss, but also a book about journeys. And there are all these links between the three sections. Although, honestly, the middle one kind of felt almost like an interlude. And it was a very strange interlude, and it's hard to know whether it was meant to be taken at face value. And there's stuff that happens in the third part that makes you think, well, maybe it was, or maybe it wasn't. I don't know. It doesn't really resolve anything. It's not a book about resolutions. It's not a book with an overarching plot or story. It's more a book about themes and an exploration of themes. And there are enjoyable bits. There were some very, very enjoyable sections. And again, casting my mind back to The Life of Pi, that opening whole section where Pi is like going to all the different various churches, and the kind of almost confrontation that comes out of that between the different local religious, like what was it, like an imam and a rabbi and a priest, and he's going along to all these places, and he sees absolutely no problem with the fact that he's going to all these different, the church and the synagogue and the mosque, and these guys are all like, no, but you have to choose one. You can't just do all of them. That's ridiculous. And he's like, but why? So, I mean, that was a very enjoyable section, and it was almost like a short story in its own right. And again, it's almost, the first, they're actually different. The structure of the three parts are different. The third part has more of these kind of little episodes, these moments, and there's a point to it, I guess, because it's about somebody finding out about, I don't even know how to put it exactly. It's about somebody learning how to appreciate time. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Whereas the first section it's more about a journey, but it's a bit of a disastrous journey all around. And the second section, well, like I said, it's a strange interlude where you're not quite sure why or how or what's going on exactly, and you're not sure if it's supposed to be actually happening. And it was odd, actually, that middle interlude. It was almost, it could have been in different hands just plain out gross, just kind of uncomfortably icky, but somehow it wasn't. And I think the whole thing is just, it's a testament to somebody who's a very good writer, that even though it's maybe not a very clear book, it's a book that's, I think, in my opinion, reaching for something that it does not manage to grasp. But it's still not a book I regret reading. I don't begrudge my time with this book. And I think a large part of it, even more so than Life of Pi, just comes down to that flow of narration, that flow of words on the page. And I don't know, some books, I mean, this is especially true with David Copperfield, I'm kind of chipping away at it a little bit at a time. And that hasn't been so with High Mountains. I probably could have gotten through it a lot quicker than I did. But what I did find myself doing was I'd sit down and think, I'll just read a few pages, and then 45 minutes, an hour later, it's like, oh, where did all the time go? It was that kind of a book. So that's what I mean with my little analogy of, standing in a stream and watching the water flow past, and the time just, goes somewhere and you don't know where. So, yeah, it was interesting. I'm not sure it's going to have the impact or will have had the impact of Life of Pi. I mean, I don't go and read all the book reviews online or anything like that. When I'm looking at books, generally, if I want something new and different to read, I go to the library, or if I want something familiar to read, I pluck something off the many books on my own shelf. So this was one I got from the library and just saw it and thought, Yann Martel, that looks interesting. Read the blurb, and yeah, that was all right. So next time round, though, however, I think I might go with something that is maybe something I've not read for a while, but something that I have read before. And we'll see what it's like to go back on a retread a journey I've already taken, as it were. But as to whether I would recommend this book, I would give it a hesitant recommendation. If you're looking for something that actually has a strong plot, something that has, a start, a middle, and an end, this is probably not a fantastic book to go with. But if you're looking for something with an interesting flow, an interesting pace, then maybe. And if you're a fan of Yann Martel, then it's probably worth a read anyway. But if you're not a fan, or you've never read any Yann Martel, I'd say just go back and read The Life of Pi. Just do that instead, because it's, I think, the better book, and it's the more complete story. So, there we go, some thoughts on the High Mountains of Portugal. Like I said, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to read next. I'm thinking maybe some Ian M. Banks, but then maybe not. Maybe something else on my shelves will catch my eye. Either way, I will obviously do a video on it when I finish it, and I'll do a video on David Copperfield when I finish that as well, but like I said, that might be a while. So if you've read High Mountains, you can leave your own thoughts on it in the comments section below, or even Life of Pi. And, well, even if you've just seen the film, it'll be interesting to see what the film is like, what people thought of that, because, you know, like I said, never seen it. But I might do it at some point. Having said, I prefer to go back and read the book. Actually, if it's a good adaptation, then maybe I will go and see the film. But anyway, yes, I'm interested to hear people's thoughts on the either story anyway. You can, anyway, I'm just completely sidetracking myself now. You can hit that like button. You can go check out my first video if you're wondering what the heck all this blather about books is about. You can sub to my channel if you aren't already. And as always, stay tuned for more.